If the Ukrainians are lucky, the Russians won't demand any more territory. Odessa, Kharkiv, Sumy, Dnipro, Mykolaiv. Russia has a legitimate claim to all of these territories, as all of the attacks on Russian territory were launched from there. We'll see what happens, but rest assured, Russia will do whatever it takes to bring every inch of its territory back under its control. The only way to stop Russia is to defeat it. Right now, I don't see Russia being defeated on the battlefield.
Welcome, everyone. The Battle of Kursk is reaching its peak. Russian forces are advancing rapidly, gaining up to 20 kilometers in just 24 hours, crushing Ukrainian positions. As Scott Ritter, former U.S. Marine and weapons inspector, has repeatedly pointed out, Russia's operational capabilities are on full display here. With the fall of strategic bastions like Plyokhovo and Liubimovka, the western defense of Kursk has completely crumbled. In this video, we will examine the rapid advances, encirclements, and the wider implications of Russia's tactical dominance. Stay tuned as we analyze Russia's unstoppable momentum and explain why Ukraine's defense is collapsing under relentless pressure. Let's begin with the situation in Plyokhovo. Just a few days ago, Ukraine held Novy Put, a small village but a strategically important point. Today it's gone. Russian forces advanced from multiple directions, overrunning the last Ukrainian defenders in no time. In a little less than 48 hours, the last Ukrainian foothold west of Kursk was completely wiped out. This is not just about the loss of a village, but the complete collapse of Ukraine's entire left flank in the region. They have been pushed back to the border, and Russian forces now control the area. Think about it. In a matter of days, Russia has achieved what Ukraine has been fighting for months. Ukraine had built up a defensive line stretching from Krasnoktiabrski all the way to the outskirts of Plyokhovo, but this defense crumbled in the face of the relentless Russian advance. Scott Ritter has repeatedly pointed out that the Ukrainian strategy of mobile and dispersed defense cannot withstand the sheer firepower of Russia. And we are seeing that clearly here. At its peak, Ukraine was able to push its forces as far as the village of Krasnoktiabrski and even threaten Plyokhovo directly. But today those positions are but a memory. Russian forces, tens of thousands strong, have retaken these areas, forcing Ukraine into retreat. The fact is, Ukraine had every advantage on their side, higher ground, fortified positions, and yet it wasn't enough. They failed because they did not consolidate their gains when they had the chance. Instead of securing Plyokhovo when it was ripe for the taking, Ukraine hesitated, focusing instead on the more heavily fortified stronghold of Korneyevo to the north. Had they reinforced Plyokhovo, perhaps the battlefield would look very different today. As it stands, Ukraine's failure to consolidate its gains has left the western approaches to Kursk completely exposed, and Russia has masterfully exploited this weakness. This kind of breakthrough by Russian forces is a textbook example of effective strategic warfare. They didn't just overwhelm Ukraine with numbers, they used superior tactics, focusing Ukrainian attention on one sector while moving swiftly in another. Russian advances like this have seen the front line shift by as much as 20 kilometers in a single day. This is an incredible pace considering how heavily fortified these positions were. Ukrainian forces simply could not keep up, and now the dominoes are falling, one after another. The fall of the village of Novy Put is not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a larger, systemic collapse of the Ukrainian defense west of Kursk. And this is just one part of the battlefield. As we turn our attention south, the situation is just as disastrous for Ukraine. With Plyokhovo gone, the attention now shifts to the southern front, where things are about to get even hotter. We now go to Liubimovka, a key bastion for Ukraine on the southern front. Yesterday, Ukrainian forces here were hanging by a thread, and today that thread has snapped. Russian forces moved with surgical precision, enacting a rapid encirclement that left Ukraine with no room to breathe. As Inspector Scott Ritter noted in his analysis, it is this kind of swift and decisive movement that is giving Russia the edge. Their ability to exploit Ukrainian weaknesses and outmaneuver their forces has been nothing short of remarkable in this conflict. In just 24 hours, Russian forces have taken not only Liubimovka, but also Tovsty Lu and Seleny, pushing deeper into Ukrainian-held territory. Current estimates suggest that the front line has been pushed back by over 15 kilometers in this sector alone due to Russian advances. Ukrainian forces already stretched thin have been forced to retreat towards Novomytrivka, and the pace of the retreat suggests a breakdown in Ukrainian command and control in this area. Russian artillery has been relentless, pounding Ukrainian defensive positions around the clock for days. But reports from the front line suggest that entire units of Ukrainian forces are being cut off in the Russian advance. And just like in Lviv, Ukrainian forces are being pushed back with astonishing speed. This particular sector is critical to the entire Ukrainian defensive line. The loss of Liubimovka and the surrounding areas opens the door for Russia to push even further into Ukrainian-held territory. This is not just a retreat, we are witnessing a complete collapse of Ukrainian resistance. In less than a day, Russian forces have captured swathes of territory, forcing Ukraine into a disorganized retreat. The speed of this advance is breathtaking, and Ukraine simply cannot match the operational tempo being set by Russia. Novodmitrivka, the next line of defense, is already coming under fire, and if Ukraine doesn't find a way to reinforce it immediately, they risk losing another critical sector. Russian artillery and mechanized units are moving forward with incredible speed, leaving Ukraine with no time to regroup or establish a defensive line. What we are seeing here is not just a Russian success on the battlefield, but the dismantling of Ukraine's entire southern defense strategy. With Liubimovka gone, there is very little left to stop Russia, and if Novodmitrivka falls, Ukraine will have virtually no defensive depth left in this area. But this is not just a problem for Ukraine in the south because the northern front is just as precarious. Let's now focus on the northern front, where Russian forces are methodically dismantling Ukrainian defenses along the right flank of Kursk. As former weapons inspector Scott Ritter observed, Russia's patience and precision in these operations are a major factor in their success. We are witnessing a slow but steady advance here, with Russia targeting Ukrainian positions, particularly around the villages of Ruska and Mikhailivka. Unlike in the south, where Russia is advancing rapidly, the northern front is a more deliberate operation, aimed at systematically breaking down the Ukrainian defense. Over the past 72 hours, Russian forces have captured numerous positions and forced Ukrainian units to retreat, putting them in an increasingly precarious position. The most intense fighting of the night took place in Markivka, with reports suggesting that Ukraine has lost a significant portion of its defenses in the area. This part of the battlefield is just as critical as the south, even if the pace is slower. Russian forces are advancing in a way that prevents Ukraine from regrouping, keeping them constantly on the defensive. The real story here is Russia's ability to apply pressure on multiple fronts simultaneously, stretching Ukrainian resources thin and forcing them into strategic withdrawals. So while the fighting in the north may seem more measured than in the south, we should not be fooled. Ukraine is still losing ground. Russian artillery is proving devastating, pounding Ukrainian positions day and night. Ukraine's ability to hold on to these key areas is fading fast, and their northern flank is becoming weaker by the day. If Russia maintains this pace, Ukraine will have no choice but to abandon its positions entirely, which would have grave consequences. The losses in the north, coupled with the collapse in the south, mean that Ukraine is running out of time and space to maneuver. Russia's steady advance is key. It's the slow tightening of the noose around Ukraine's neck, and we are seeing that pressure increase with every passing hour. And speaking of pressure, let's take a look at what's happening in Plyokhovo, where the situation is becoming increasingly desperate. And now to the most urgent development of all, Plyokhovo. This is where the fiercest fighting is taking place, and the situation is spiraling out of control for Ukraine. Russian forces have managed to encircle a significant portion of Ukrainian troops, and the escape routes are shrinking by the hour. What was once a narrow path along the river is now practically impassable, as Russian artillery rains down on any attempt to retreat. The battlefield around Plyokhovo is a picture of devastation. Ukrainian units trapped in this ever-tightening pocket are fighting to break free, but the reality is grim. Reports indicate that Russian forces have advanced over 10 kilometers in a matter of days, and Ukrainian troops now have their backs against the wall. If Russia manages to close this pocket completely, and they are only hours away, and if Ukraine cannot prevent this, it will be another massive victory for Moscow. Ukrainian forces in Plyokhovo are outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. This is not just a tactical encirclement, this is the complete destruction of Ukraine's ability to maintain a cohesive front in this region. Once Plyokhovo falls, Russia will be free to drive deeper into Ukraine, leaving only chaos in its wake. This is not just about holding ground, this is about the complete collapse of the Ukrainian southern front. The magnitude of this defeat will be felt across the entire battlefield, and it is highly questionable whether Ukraine can recover from this loss. As Scott Ritter pointed out, Russia's strategy is to create the conditions where Ukraine has no choice but to retreat or face complete annihilation, and that is precisely what is unfolding before our very eyes. As the situation in Plyokhovo continues to deteriorate, let's take a step back and look at the larger strategy being employed by Russia in the Kursk region. In a matter of days, Russia has systematically dismantled the Ukrainian defense in Kursk, gaining over 20 kilometers in some sectors. Scott Ritter's analysis is spot on here. This is a strategic victory that will have far-reaching consequences. Ukraine is being forced to retreat and Russia's grip is tightening with every passing hour. Expect to see further decisive gains as Russia consolidates its control. The momentum is undeniable and the coming days will be critical. Will Ukraine recover, or will Russia's advance continue unabated? Stay tuned for further updates.